I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. Andrew Quo. Today is a sad day. We are in mourning. Mm-hmm. Are we? Are we in mourning? I just want to say, after falling victim to the Knicks in the Knicks versus Sixers Cookie Civil War, now it is time to extend an olive branch to my fallen comrade.
I feel amazing. The sun has come out. I'm rubbing my eyes like Milhouse in The Simpsons. There's people frolicking on my street. It's as if the orange and blue shackles have been unchained from our feet. I no longer have to stare at screens. I could touch grass, eat ramps, etc., etc. As they say,
I will
say. Yeah.
I will say the beautiful weather for the last 2 days really made the Knicks L go over easier, I think, for the city of New York. If it was raining or cold, people would be pretty pissed off, but I saw everyone walking around the city in their Knicks hats and their Cookies Hoops merch, just grinning, sauntering, as you said, frolicking. I think, well, we're going to have, obviously we're talking Knicks Pacers later. I think the instant takeaway was, once the news came out that Brunson's hand was broken, everyone's like, all right, we're getting on with our day.
All right, sip. Save it for the show. We got other things to discuss.
Yes.
Like how amazing you look. Have you lost 40 to 50 pounds? I mean, people can't see through the wire or through their earbuds, but Ben's looking like a rap legend courtside at the Garden.
Yeah, I've been horking Ozempic over the last couple of weeks, and I've gone down from my fighting weight, which was about 300 pounds, to now I'm in my woo-ha weight.
You got famous. You got famous being known as Fat Ben, but now you're just Ben. The neighborhood knows you as just Ben.
Wait, is Fat Joe's Ozempicing too, right?
He has to be. I mean, yeah. I don't know. It's not as drastic as Busta.
I thought you were talking Busta first, but then Fat Joe also applies.
Ozempic, I mean, no one called you Busta.
No. Ozempic has hit the rap legend circuit hard.
Especially, well, we bring this up because courtside, at the mecca of basketball, Busta Rhymes was pictured grinning with his veneers from cheek to cheek, toothsome grin, and he looks like he lost like a good 30 pounds from like a few weeks ago when he was wearing the same outfit he was photographed in. And you know, Busta's kind of yoked out, and he's age positive, so he's no longer like lifting like he used to. And you know, he's putting on that middle-age weight, that ramp weight, as they say. And it was shocking, and there was a lot of debate, because there's no one who likes to debate more than 90s rap heads on Twitter.
Right. Yeah, so Busta's body trajectory, when he was younger, a leader of the new school, slender dude. Yeah. Then, as you said, he got very buff, but he was also kind of the like chunky buff.
He was big buff. He's tall,
as you said.
Yeah,
he's a big guy too. As you said, he was like lifting weights, but he was also eating like a madman, carbo loading. And then he got just like sort of enormously big, like unhealthy big. And remember, he had that health scare where he like had a seizure on stage.
Yeah.
And collapsed. So anyway, we get back to now, and it looks like he has shed half of his body mass. He is back to being skinny. He is a leader of the old school. Mm-hmm. And people say, is he cheating? Is getting the jab cheating? Busta didn't even stop like eating, the meatballs from Avenue, or no, the Lavo meatballs, excuse me, and the
nachos,
the nachos from the Avenue Cantina of his own free will.
Right.
He gave this over to the drugs.
Right. I mean, it was jarring to see, not only because of his veneers, but like, we're still trying to figure out as a whole how we feel about Ozempic, right? Because on one hand, super healthy, it saves people's lives, probably. It's safe, like, why not, right? Is it any different than eating well? Choosing to take a pill. It's expensive. It may be kind of a sprinkling of classist debate here or there, because not many people who desperately need this drug can afford it. But Busta can certainly afford it. Is it ethical body transformation? Like, do you look at a lot of our friends, like from New York, on the low, got plastic surgery. Is that ethical? Like, I think they look great. And I'm like, oh, you got a little work done. And they're like, yeah, a little bit. It was minor, but like, can you tell? I'm like, kinda, but not really. Like, are you in support of this?
Well, I remember when you got the leg lengthening surgery.
Don't tell everybody, bro. My arms are short for just naturally. My arms are tiny T-Rex arms just naturally.
There was a lot of whispering around the downtown circuit. Like, did Andrew just grow 8 inches in his 30s?
Did he read a book?
Or, like, wait, why is he so tall? Are those stilts? Did he acquire busking skills? And then people found out that that's why you're 6'6" now, because they broke your legs in many parts and pieced them back together, and your arms are now disproportionately tiny.
Mm-hmm. And this is why you're playing weight now. Like, can we admit to everybody our ethical transformations?
So I think when it comes to Ozempic, you hit on 2 key points, and one of them is that we've never viewed diet pills as being a legit way to lose weight. Clearly, humans, since they've become more sentient, and they weren't running around, plucking things from trees and racing across the
whales,
the landscape. Exactly. Once people started basically chilling and eating a lot, and there was more food security, people started getting fat. And
Grains.
Go back to look at Henry VIII. Look at this. Look at his fat ass. So we've always viewed being in shape as being kind of opposed to the puritanical biblical idea of sloth. Like, there is something morally wrong about being fat as hell, just from like even a biblical sense. It's sloth, it's laziness, it's idleness.
Right, it's the ruling class, right? It is people who are privileged enough to be fat.
Right, and then you had sort of a
body positive.
Diet pills have been around for a long time. I'm sure they were around in the 70s and things like that, but it was probably just methamphetamine.
MSG, Raymond Felton.
But point being, I think that there is this idea of hard work that is associated with being skinny, that it's self-deprivation of not eating what you want to eat, not drinking what you want to drink, hitting the treadmill. There's this idea that it is a sign of having strong will and being able to overcome your slovenly instincts. And Ozempic says, hey, cool, we're just going to kick those instincts in for you. You're not going to want to eat. You're not going to want to drink. You're not going to want to buy art, according to Andrew Quell. All of those instincts that we all try to suppress are just gone.
Yeah.
So we say, that's not fair. I'm busting my hump, eating these nachos, and then, walking an extra 10 minutes a day, trying to get those 1,000, 100,000, 10,000 steps up. And you're just popping a pill because you can get it from your doctor? Not fair, not cool.
Well, it keeps on flip-flopping, right? And it was like a culture war for a while when you think of LA and their fitness thing and their juicing. So people either were skinny because they were poor or skinny because they were rich, or fat because they were poor and body positive because they were rich, whatever. And then Ozempic kind of demolishes this cultural debate and it's just like, anyone can do it if you have the money. Like, you know, it's a pill. You don't have to exert effort. You just have to pay for it. And there's no side effects that we know of. We're finding out a little bit, but it still seems pretty safe. And it works really fucking well. And then a lot of celebrities noticeably got it. But now it's trickled to sports and rap. And it seems like, does it seem, I'll phrase this as a question, does it seem like a betrayal?
I mean, I think it's fair to call it a shortcut. I just don't think we need to moralize it. You know, but I think you made a good point before where someone like Mindy Kaling was known for being body positive. And then she's like, yeah, actually, I'm going to take Ozempic and be skinny because I kind of would rather be skinny. And people are like, I guess you've betrayed us. We've been riding for you. Yeah. But clearly you'd rather be thin because you went and became thin. Mm-hmm. If you were happier before, you would have stayed that way. But you clearly didn't want to. But I think it's fair to say it's a shortcut. But I also think it's fair to say that diabetes medicine is a shortcut. Like, oh, you wanted to drink, cherry Coke your whole life, and now look at you.
Type 2
you got diabetes.
Type 2, not type 1, right? Because type 1, you don't have a choice.
Right. You know what I'm saying, though. It's like,
right.
All right, you lived a certain way, and now you're sick, and now you've got medicine to prevent yourself from dying. Cheater.
Well, it's like Lipitor, right? Like, famously, Bourdain on his show would be like, yeah, I'm going to eat all this. I'm on Lipitor. It's fine. My doctor's going to kill me, but it's just a pill. And, like, I'm into all this stuff. I got a couple friends who were on all these pills and then hit a point where they were like, ooh, maybe if I just change my life, I can get off of all these pills and the potential side effects of them. And I'm like, that's a good place to be in life. Not everyone can do that, but like, it's like smoking cigarettes, right? I have at least 2 friends who smoke because they're like, I eat so poorly, man. Every time I quit smoking, I put on like 10 pounds and it's like not cool. So I enjoy smoking. I feel like I'm healthy, so I'm going to keep on smoking, right? And I'm kind of with that, the metabolism thing, all that stuff. So like, Busta Rhymes, is he doing it for us? Is he doing it for him? Why is he doing it? If he's doing anything. If he's just not, if he's sick, apologies, right? Like if he doesn't feel well, all this stuff. But if he's doing this to look good, who's his audience?
Yeah, I think it's just for himself, right?
But why not?
I would not say Busta Rhymes is getting skinny because he thinks it will rejuvenate his career. We're used to hefty bust.
I mean, he knows he's going to get photographed at the Garden, so like that happened fast. But I think the photo of him at the weight we know him as was during Nas's Illmatic anniversary event, which was like this month. But like, if you were Busta and you had the choice, like, you can get ripped again or you can get skinny. Isn't it kind of interesting if he has that choice? Isn't it interesting that there's a time where he's like, I want to get skinny? Because he's been yoked out forever.
Yeah, true. I mean, I don't know. I think like, if you get syphilis like Friedrich Nietzsche,
Jesus,
you should just die of it. You're out there raw dogging it in these streets. You got syphilis. Forget the pills. Just lose your mind. Perish.
How long
die
can
like
you
Al
live
Capone
with
or Franz Schubert?
How long can you survive with syphilis? Are we talking 40 years? Or are we talking 40 months?
I have no idea.
Because you can live till your 70s as a big boy, right?
I mean, Kissinger was old as shit, and he was not Ozempic'd out.
Yo, your boy Donald Trump is like 95 in diapers with the nuclear codes.
It's crazy that there was once an era where presidential candidates didn't all wear diapers.
That they could play pickup games with Will Welsh.
Like, how can you trust a president who isn't so focused on leading the free world that they aren't diapered up?
Who's heard of the blueprint? Who's actually heard the blueprint?
Cavorts with young Jeezy.
Yeah. Has children who aren't 50 years old.
Dude, this is Baron Erasure.
Yo, can Baron hoop or what?
I don't know. He's got to be like 6'6".
I mean, before leg lengthening surgery, he was 6'1". Bronny James, get to the doctor's stat.
Seriously, it was all right there.
It's a choice, Bronny. Yeah, you're making a choice here. You've chosen this. Did Post Malone make a choice in his career? Talking about rappers.
What's going on with your man Post Malone?
I don't hate Post Malone. He's got songs he's been relevant for a long time, like as a pop star. But he got a little shade on social media because he was posting in like some kind of like fishing boat with a huge American flag, with like a beat up cap that did not say basketball on it, dressed up like not a rap pop star. Maybe going back to his perceived roots. I'm not really sure of his complete origin story, but people were mad. The same people who are curious about Busta were mad at this Post Malone image because is their culture his costume?
So I remember when first we heard of Post Malone, and this pod had a different name. It was on No Wave. I remember reaching out to Post Malone's management because I heard the song White Iverson. That piqued my interest, and he was supposed to come on the show as a guest. And this was, I don't think there was a video. I just knew it as a SoundCloud song, like White Iverson. It was not a pop record. It wasn't. It was just kind of mildly going viral. Had a basketball tie-in. I hit him up, and he flaked on us. He was supposed to call in, didn't. Then his manager emailed back and apologized, and whatever. That was that. Then within like a month, he became huge. At that time, I remember there were some YouTube clips that showed him playing like really goofy country music, and I can't remember why it was so goofy, but it was like maybe he was wearing like underwear or had his hair in like a weird way. There was something about it that was like hyper goofy, but he was doing country. But it wasn't also that authentic country though. It was like goofy fake song country. Yeah. So like I don't know what lies in his heart of heart, Andrew, where his true roots lie. To me, it seems like being a troll and entertainer is where his true roots lie. Like being, the subject of attention and making music, regardless of what it sounds like, is actually his passion. But it is funny because a lot of times when you see white rap artists, whether it's like Kid Rock or Everlast, when they want to make a late career transition over to being a pop artist, they segue into doing country or doing folk and using guitars. And it's always been this off-ramp for the white rapper in a way that really isn't necessarily as easy to do if you aren't a white dude or a white woman in theory.
I mean, Beyonce tried. I believe her country record went #1, but I don't hear or see much of it around in my feed or walking around New York. Still might be huge. I'm not sure, but this is like a tradition, right? Like my question is like, are we wasting our time? Because if you scroll through like the top songs in the country charts, like they're all, some of them are all kind of rap informed. There's beats, there's cadences that kind of appeal to popular music. It's been crossed over, no Iverson pun here, but the crossover happened generations ago, kind of messing with the history of the South, right? Especially when Atlanta, Georgia became the rap capital of the world. It was just kind of logical that it would be infused with country music. And Beyonce kind of claims that her album is because she grew up in Houston and this is her. So like authenticity is not in the discussion. The quality of the music is. And it always comes back to authenticity 4 out of 7 times. And like, I don't know, man, this is all American music. The 2 biggest contributions to world culture America has to offer is probably like country music and rap music, right? No one listens to jazz anymore, and no one eats garbage plates in gay Paris.
I mean, yeah, rock music, you got techno.
Yeah, but rock was kind of had its golden age in London. Like, I don't know. The best rock bands of all time are not American. Maybe that's my point.
I see what you're saying. I don't know. Look, I don't think that Post Malone is necessarily in the same category as a Kid Rock or Everlast.
He's better, right?
Well, he
Post
was
Malone's
just
good.
he was a much bigger star than them.
Yeah.
But B, he also was singing at the same, from the jump.
Yeah.
Someone like Everlast was always a rapper. He was down with Ice-T when he was a teenager. Then he came up as a member of the BMM, making Boston pilled leprechaun anthems.
He
was never a country rapper. And even him though, it's funny because the whole he's Irish now. He just kind of added a fake accent and a Larry Bird jersey. It was all a shtick.
It's all good though, right? Like, this is just what performance is. I mean, people who are mad at Post Malone have a point. I'm not denying that. It's like, it feels, if someone rolled up to Dime Square wearing Nick shorts, Wallabies, no socks, white tee, I'd be like, fair enough. I guess I have to move on. But I'm in my feelings about this a little bit. I get why people are mad. Like, their memories are important to them. And as soon as LeBron James comes along, or Wembanyama, and if Luka wins a championship, it's like, well, I need to fight harder to preserve my Jordan originalist memories, because this is my origin story, and origins can't change, and I don't want to see mine change, the perception of it. So
I don't think that's what people are annoyed by. Post Malone, though, right?
Are you sure? People are just like, that's my shit. You can't take my shit.
Well, I'm not sure I've seen all the same critiques. I would say that
Post Malone, you haven't seen this? I mean, this has been going on his whole career, right? Like, this guy ain't real. And I'm like, maybe not. I don't know.
I'm talking about the country pivot. I'm saying I think the main critique of that would be that, you wanted to make black music and embrace black culture when it was to build your brand and become a star and make money and become, a household name. And once you've gotten that and you're sort of cooling off, or people don't care as much about your
A long career.
what you're making right now, you're going to go back on some white shit and say, actually, I'm a patriot. I'm going to sit under an American flag on a fishing boat. I'm a country boy. And you're like, wait, I thought you were down with amigos. Thought you were hanging out over here. I thought you were making this kind of music and, sort of on our team. And now you're over here saying, actually, I'm a good old boy. And like, I'm not saying any of these are right or wrong. I just think that would be more of the critique, is that you used an art form and a subculture to profit off of it. And once you saw that starting to run dry, you went back on the other side.
I mean, people were mad at Beyonce for that American flag too, right? And the all flag controversies are not as interesting to me. It's just like, we're arguing over really abstract ideas, which is the interesting point, I guess. But like, the American flag should not, or should, offend accordingly. Altering it should and should not offend accordingly. I find it to be kind of a dead-end debate, depending on how valuable you find symbols to be. I'm like, fuck it up. I don't care. It's like, it doesn't offend me when I see an American flag in MSG, in a sports arena, or in a Pacers game, you know. But I get it, and I think arguing over images and arguing over like intention is crucial to the success that, you know, Post Malone wants to be on the right side of this. Beyonce wants to be on the right side of this, but I wonder if this controversy is something, to your point, he's been around a long time, and artists don't get this kind of career often. And in order to maintain it, there has to be a few shifts here and there. Like Katy Perry cannot stay relevant. She was relevant for so long and then kind of lost it. And Post Malone hasn't quite lost it yet, but maybe this is like a calculated risk on his part.
I mean, I also view it, like we use the phrase culture as a costume when we talk about garbage plates. We talk about all types of stuff. This is
RJ
actually,
Barrett jerseys. Yeah.
right. Whateverist Kings. This is actually that, though, right? This is what people mean when they use that phrase. Whether or not you agree with it being a negative thing or you believe it's positive, whatever.
Or putting on a
ambivalent.
suit. Right. Like anyone putting on a suit.
This is the definition, though, where it's like, okay, Post Malone, you're like, you know what? I've got my money off of this. This whole rap thing was cool. I got my face tatted up, smoked a lot of weed, got some gold teeth. Think I'm going to go over and be a country star now. It's this idea that you can dabble in the culture as a costume, take it off and go do something else. And I think that's kind of why Eminem never seemed to be that interested in switching away. Because Eminem really is like a rap dude through and through. He never, as far as I can think of, said, oh, I want to go become a country musician, this, because the guy is a rapper. Like, born a rapper, dies a rapper, sang odd couplets that don't even make any sense. I mean, an annoying voice for life.
And he's not as interesting as Post Malone, right, in the later part of his career. And, you know, it makes me think of Chris Gaines, you know, like Garth Brooks, his emo alter ego, because he had interests elsewhere. But did you have any takes on Luke Combs getting a smash hit #1 record off a Tracy Chapman cover?
I guess that feels like a costume culture scenario, huh?
I don't know. Like, it was an awesome song, right?
And
like,
also, Tracy Chapman's song is an all-time great. It's a huge, huge hit. Like, aren't we
people
allowed
got mad,
to?
Though. People got
I know
real
they did,
mad.
but I know. I just mean, aren't remakes fair game? Like, they happen a lot.
Yeah, I mean, people were questioning the source coming from Luke Combs, and he didn't change the lyrics on purpose. You know, he has the same pronouns, he talks about the same stuff, and he's open about it. He's like, this is an homage to a great artist. I am not trying to make it my own. I am trying to like do a cover of this great. He played it like a New York Knicks locker room legend. He was like, I'm not great. Tracy Chapman is great. Oh, I'm #1. Just incredible. Yo, clap to Tracy Chapman. And Tracy Chapman was a great participator in this, right? They performed together at an award show. She's like, I'm down, whatever. Notoriously or famously elusive personality. So that felt kind of strange too when that song came out. They're like, this is kind of a revered person, but on the surface, my delight was that like we get to think about this song again, which is not in our zeitgeist, right? Like we're not thinking about Fast Car in 2023 until we are.
It's weird. I actually listened to it a decent amount, but also just that album. Mm-hmm. Like once or twice a year, I throw it on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Also, came out 36 years ago, man. I mean, what's the term of limitations for doing a cover? I just feel like that we're looking at a media landscape where people are old enough to remember that song when it came out, but also too young to think of it in the real terms of 36 years.
The New York Times named it the song of the century. Not this century, that century. When when John Starks was roaming the garden. But yeah, it's an old song, but it's important to people, right? Because it is serious. It's kind of
It's great. It's a perfect song. It's great.
It captured the entire century, basically, and I don't disagree with it. I believe the New York Times called that song the song of the century, and Do the Right Thing the movie of the century. I got no qualms with that. Those two things are untouchable. But
just some funny math here, right?
Yeah.
So like the year 2000 is obviously a long time ago, but the equivalent would be a song coming out in 1964. A song in 2000 sampled something from the early 60s. I can't think of people being fired up about it. I think this is just people unable to grasp their own age.
Maybe, but time is fast and slow, right? Like I remember talking to a young Knicks fan this weekend, and I was like, well, credit to Tyson Chandler, J.R. Smith, and the God Carmelo Anthony. They had a great season too. Not like this. And they're like, I was barely alive when that happened. I'm like, God damn, that's right. Because I expect that to be the 99 finals take when they met up with young Tim Duncan. But now we shift the entire thing, and youth happens fast. Like you're 8 and 18 in a blink. And it's different than being like 30 and 40, right? So when someone's just like, I've heard Carmelo Anthony was good, but I've never actually like watched a video of it. I'm like, holy shit. Okay, enjoy this. This is a winning franchise, cultural thing. But yeah, this music stuff is interesting because, especially talking about Albini last week, there are very few subcultures that kind of like grip enough people. And like we have these distilled artists, a handful of distilled artists that we can mark time with. And it's really hard to mark time with someone like Post Malone or Taylor Swift, because especially Taylor Swift, who's always like reissuing records, kind of establishing eras just so she can jumble them up, kind of looks the same. And it does a funny thing in my mind where I used to know the years these albums came out. Now it's like, did Red come out 5 years ago or 15 years ago?
Yeah, man. I hear that.
It's hard to fucking tell, right? Like, because streaming is so fast and easy. It's like, Tracy Chapman's amazing. When did this come out? 2010? It's like, no, it did not.
Well, right. Well, I think part of it is that we also listen to music and digest it almost the same way all the time now.
Yeah.
It's like, on my computer. I was on my computer when I first heard that. And when did that news come out? I was on my computer. I saw it on my phone.
And here it up. I can bring it up the same exact way. Boom. Here's Diddy rapping his ass off.
Right. And of course, when you talk about old head shit, and I'm saying not just us, but going back and back and back, so much of us, where were you when you heard about Kennedy getting shot? Everyone has their tale. And now it's like, well, I don't know, it's on my phone.
Yeah.
And it's just different. It's just different. And I'm sure if you went back centuries, where were you when you heard that, like, I don't know, someone in the Fertile Crescent got, assassinated? You're like, oh, the Persian king got killed 8 years ago. Damn. Like, the time and the immediacy is completely different. But you probably remember where you were. Like, I was sowing the crops when I found out that the king died a decade earlier.
I mean, it's an incredible thing that it does with our brains, because you mentioned JFK. How many people would think of Oliver Stone and Kevin Costner first, right? Like, I always think, like, the movie Basquiat was as influential as his actual paintings were, because so many kids saw that movie and it's like, oh, this is the romance of New York and being an artist, downtown artist, as opposed to the documentary about him. And I think about, like, we mentioned Spike Lee. I wonder how many people think of Denzel Washington as Malcolm X before the actual image of Malcolm X because the casting was so good, you know. Art does a weird thing like that, and its objective is to erase time. I think if you dug up syphilis legend Van Gogh from his grave and asked him, hey man, your work still looks like fire in 2024, he'd be like, good, I have syphilis.
Yes, I think we would shame him for taking antibiotics.
Well, this is an incredible question. I kind of want to go down this tangent because remember that 60 Minutes episode when all these great antidepressants came out? And they were like, but if we had antidepressants during the age of like these great painters, Van Gogh specifically, who clearly needed it because he was schizophrenic and all this stuff, would we get his paintings? And then the scientists were like, well, that's a question we have to ask. Like, what is a personality? Are you a big boy or are you a skinny boy personality? Like, I'm like Bronny James. I'm 5'5" in Hokas. Don't measure me without Hokas.
Hokas are officially rinsed.
Oh, why do you say that now? Did something happen?
Oh yeah, it's like they're the shoe of Joe Biden.
But we claimed them rinsed like a couple years ago. I was
know.
very into them. I was very into them, but.
No. We've been on them being rinsed, but now it's officially done.
Why? It was Biden and not Kanye? I thought the Kanye boots were the end.
Well, Kanye was wearing the boots. That was fine. He was even early on the big black boots.
Well, the big black boots were kind of when they hit their certain peak, and we were on this pod being like, it was fun while it lasted. Kanye's wearing them.
And then they became normie wear. But now they're
fucking comfortable, man.
They are comfortable, but now they're Joe Biden wear, like the genocide ones.
What if Joe Biden came out and was like, Sixers?
Well, he probably is a Sixers fan.
I'm saying, like, Netanyahu's also probably a Sixers fan. Philadelphia the streets of Philly. He's like, well, I like the Phillies, I like the Flyers, and Dr. J is my favorite player. He has to be a Dr. J fan, right? Or Barkley? Yeah, am I getting my years fucked up?
Netanyahu says, bring back Tobias.
He's in his Mo Cheeks jersey, presiding over his destruction.
What do you guys think of Maxey?
Yeah. Maxey top 5, prove me wrong.
Ricky Council 4.
Yeah. Springer, you're gonna regret that. I mentioned Diddy real quick. Do we want to talk about that psychotic motherfucker?
I mean, my biggest take on Diddy was that his lunacy was known for years, you know? I mean, going back to him assaulting Steve Stout with a champagne bottle. I mean, there was the stuff about Kid Cudi and Diddy blowing up his car.
I'm sorry to laugh, but that's just like such a Ben Affleck ass movie.
But there was always rumors about him being like about the orgy and into sex stuff, but also with him being violent and him being a gangster. And look, I'm not going to say this is a rap issue where the idea of someone being tough and badass is like romanticized, because I think it is in all types of different culture, right? I mean, Harvey Weinstein was renowned for being mean and smart and things like that. So I'm just, I'm not signaling out.
Your boy Epstein.
But I mean, it's just the culture, right? If this guy, he's a badass, don't mess with him. Like, it's just part of business and culture. I'm not saying this is a rap specific thing, but it's pretty clear that a lot of people, and especially when Diddy got to the level he did, I mean, he rocked the vote, Andrew. He got out there and he rocked the vote. He voted or died. He voted or died.
He threw a concert as an anniversary to his work, his life's work at Barclays, and Fat Ben was there.
But there was, he was a huge, huge cultural figure going back to the 90s. And there were rumors about his kind of behavior this entire time. And clearly people knew what was up. Maybe not the extent, but they had a pretty good idea. And then we hear the charges against him.
We saw the video.
And then right, we heard about that, and then we saw the video.
Right.
What's kind of depressing about the whole thing is that the cultural response in some ways to this has been like, no Diddy. It's like replacing pause with no Diddy. You're like, It's not like, oh, I'm vicious and abusive and predatory. It's like, I'm not gay.
Yeah, that's stupid. It's part of it is the joke that his name is Diddy. I don't know what iteration moniker that is for him, but right, that's annoying. I don't like all that no Diddy stuff. But I did find myself on St. James Place this weekend in Brooklyn, where it used to be Bed-Stuy, but now it's Clinton Hill, where Biggie grew up in his apartment, like right off of Fulton. And there's a memorial. Well, there's not a memorial. There's a lot of artwork honoring his life. There's a mosaic with a mirror on it, like "We are Biggie," but it's too high, so I can't see it, which is hilarious. It's like, am I not Biggie? And then there's a lot of Big Papa kind of like language going on, spray paint murals, and I was looking at it and I was like, oh, it casts a different light now a little bit, knowing what we know about Puff Daddy. And they were young men together and very powerful, and huge pop stars together at the time. And it's complicated what you're talking about. Like, I don't know if Biggie was alive, if he would distance himself, how he would react to his best friend being exposed like this. But people have lives, right? And this was before social media, and it's like, well, I know he's a weirdo, but like, I'm about to go on tour. It's like, well, I know he's a weirdo, but I'm about to like write a book about something else. And you mentioned the lexicon of like no Diddy, and I think of Cameron, and it's like, stop snitching, no snitching. That was a whole cultural thing for a decade or two, because people just weren't hammering other artists like that until we get to all the way up to 2024, where Kendrick is being like, Drake is not only a whack artist, he's a bad person. I'm like, oh damn, so we are snitching for better or worse now.
I mean, I don't know what Biggie's relationship was with Diddy.
We'll never know.
I mean, there were rumors, and I'm not trying to like, I can't spread 35-year-old rumors, whatever. There were rumors that he wanted to leave Bad Boy.
That's right.
And that he was upset about selling his publishing to Diddy for $1 million, which, you know, he needed that money because he was broke, but it obviously ended up being worth a lot more than that. And that his goal was to start a record label with Lance Rivera. And there were whispers that, you know, this was the reason he died, that Puff was involved with it. I'm not making that accusation. I have no idea at all. I just remember that was part of like the various discussions about Biggie's death. It was like, maybe it was Puff, and maybe it was because Biggie wanted to leave Bad Boy. The thing is, we don't know what his contract was like. It was like a 7-album contract or something, you know. But I do remember that specifically being the idea that he wanted to go and start a label with and Cameron was going to be on it, and Charlie Baltimore, and those ended up being artists who were on it. So
I know, it's just like a bygone era, and like, this is the Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell era of New York, and like, it was a completely different landscape. The clubs were kind of like sloppier. They were all kind of concentrated in the West Side. Nightlife was different. Pop stardom was different. The way we consumed all this stuff was completely different. And it's all having like trouble. It's all having growing pains, like fitting into a different box, right? And like, I think about the few and far between nights I do get to step out. Like, I don't kind of recognize like the codes anymore. You know, like, it's not a huge difference, but I'm like, oh, not only do I remember when Fast Car came out, like these clubs are the same and different, you know?
Well, I think you're trying to neatly segue into a discussion of Emily Sundberg's GQ story, why members-only clubs are everywhere right now. Am I correct?
Just segue, bro. Just take the oop. Just throw it down, big man. Yeah.
Is that where we're at?
I see the alley. Is that an alley for me? Should I jump and throw that down?
Yeah, but it's funnier to step on the...
I mean, do your thing, man. It's like Rudy Gobert over here. How are we going to get to this conference final?
I mean, I could have said, that's interesting you mentioned that,
Oh, that brings another topic up.
That's interesting that you bring up nightlife and nightclubs and the transitions of the...
Well, Diddy had Justin's, right? Now Justin's an older adult, taking heat for this stuff he's done. I remember Justin's was like a restaurant named after his baby.
It's interesting because I was at Casa Cipriani in the members only club the other day, and it reminded me of this story.
Oh my God.
They dropped Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, in fact.
I was wearing a Malcolm X t-shirt. The best merch line ever.
Emily Sundberg, who is a writer for various publications, did a deep dive on the current climate of New York City nightlife in terms of members-only clubs. So those are fairly easy to understand. You get admitted, and then you pay some money. And then you have access to facilities, which range from places where you might meet the mayor, or places like the Soho House. And Soho House now is kind of an institution, I guess, in terms of these sort of places, or like what's the other one, like the New York Athletic Club? Oh, I'm sorry, the Racket and Tennis Club. That's one, and that's more old school. But now you've got ZZ Club, which is one of the Carbone properties, or the major food groups properties.
Right.
Let's see, there's a few other ones like Zero Bond, which is where your boy Eric Adams
Eric,
most
what's
nights,
up?
apparently.
Nothing. Yeah. I've been to a few. I've taken a few meetings back in the day at places that had no signage or like access point. Like, meet me in the 5th floor of this building. I'm like, what is this place? Like, oh, it's a club I belong to. I'm like, fuck if I know, man. These are expensive ass paintings on the walls. They're everywhere. Yeah.
I mean, they included Silencio in this list, which is kind of weird to me, only because like it's just a room from when I was there, and it was just full of strobe lights and fog. Did not feel like a social club, but there's a few different ones. There's one called Chez Margot that's opening up. They're really leaning in on these French places. And some of these are like, if you're 31 and under, it costs $1,800 a year. If you're over 31, it's $2,600 a year. But other ones are far more expensive.
Like preschool and kindergarten. Got it.
So I was trying to think of this in the context of New York City nightlife, and the 80s are before our time as far as like going out, and I think there were a lot of these same kind of members-only clubs back then as well. That's my understanding, that it's a cyclical thing. And in some ways, I view this as a part of the conversation we were having last pod about the death of the models and bottles model. That stopped working. And this is the natural progression of that, where you had this balance of velvet ropes, like, can you get in? Do you know the right people? With, are you willing to pay for it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and this is sort of the upending of that, where it's like you don't really have to know cool people, but you still might have to know the right people or fit a certain criteria. But really, you're just going to have to pay. If you hit some criteria and you pay, you're good to go.
To me, it's always struck me as kind of an economic move. Like, do you want to sell medium price espresso martinis to knuckleheads screaming about firing Tibbs and trading away Julius Randle? Or do you want to shrink the size of your clientele but quadruple the prices? And the appeal of your place becomes exclusivity and not necessarily quality, same quality, but you have to be invited. It's sort of like everyone can come in. It's like, I don't want to go. It's like, actually, you have to be invited. It's like, well, what's in there, And it's a simple kind of capitalist thing. And these clubs kind of have always followed that economic plan because it's much easier to run a Silencio than it is like a tunnel.
Right. Well, what I was trying to get to was that the idea of exclusivity on some cool shit. Yeah, you want people who are rich and famous in there. They have cachet. But ultimately, the cool part was what made it work. Hey, this place is really cool. So people who are rich and famous and can spend money will want to come here. And then that will have a boomerang effect on getting more cool people to come here. And the normies can be excluded. And we'll just end up with this room full of people who are wealthy and famous, but also cool. And then we'll fill it with people who are attractive and cool. And that's going to be our ideal New York City nightlife model, whether that's Studio 54, Beatrice, or whatever. That's the idea. But then when you had to balance exclusivity with, well, these guys are bankers and they're just willing to pay $10,000 because they want to have this table in this cool room. And then you had that fragile balance of trying to convince cool people to be in a place where a significant amount of the people in there weren't cool. And this is why we're going to last week, where that model fell apart.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have the value is in the curation, right? Like we always talk about people who are holding these tables on Seamless or Resi, and they're making a profit off of being middlemen there, but the skill involved is like, well, which seats do you have? We want those. And you don't start a members only club if you want cool people without knowing all the cool people first. I remember my friend owned a really great bar, like packed, but like getting in trouble with like the city was trying to shut him down. Like there was fights. He was worried about lawsuits. Like it was just too lit, right? It was not lit. And his plan was great. His plan was like, fuck all this. I don't want to go to court on a Wednesday. I'm going to shut down the main room. I have a license upstairs and downstairs. I'm going to shut down the main room, sell a few T-shirts and a few sneakers, and have people sit around like the Rivington Sneaker Club, A-Life Rivington Club, and then downstairs have a bar that just like has like a capacity of 20. And if you want to drink and you remember this place, you have to be invited. We're going to make no money off of these drinks, but we're going to make money off of shoes and T-shirts because he had access. I thought that was like, this was like 15 years ago. I was like, right, at a certain point you get old enough where you're like, I want to go back to country music and I don't want to fight anymore.
For me, I think I just want to eat $1,000 steak.
But does it come with a show is what I want. Is it burlesque? Are there tassels on the steak?
I want it to come out in a briefcase. And I want it to be in Miami, Florida. And I want it to be at a place called Poppy Steak. And I want it to be a massive slab of bone-in Australian Wagyu in a waiter with white gloves, and it needs to have a sizzling iron that puts the logo on it, that brands it on that slab? Can you provide
Miami
that for me,
Heat.
please?
Miami Heat logo, Heat culture. So this is the viral clip that went out of Poppy Steak with this post Models and Bottles model, and now the steak model, which is, they clearly looked at social media and was like, how do we replicate what the Salt Bae did when he first dropped? It's like, make a spectacle, kind of produce a video around it, and push that as a viral, like, what the fuck kind of thing. Have people debate what it is, and have it be a must experience for celebrities who are like, if you're a Floyd Mayweather and you're in Florida, be like, can I get one of those steaks in that gold suitcase? I have so much money, and this is the only thing I do with it. And you only need to sell a couple of those to get people in the door.
I mean, I'm in favor of all that occurring, but it should just happen in Miami.
So no New York. Like, Salt Bae did not work in New York, but he turned into like kind of a hated dude in a Halliburton way.
Oh, I know this. I know this guy. I was just looking up this restaurant, Poppy's Steakhouse.
Who is it?
I've met David Grootman before.
Who is it?
One of the owners of it. He has he did Live Nation money. He opened Live. Yeah. That was back when I was writing about nightlife for the New York Times. I actually met him in Miami, and
So he knows what he's doing. This is no mistake. Pun intended.
Yeah. This guy's, he's been figuring out how to extract cash from the Miami nightlife scene and tourists for a long time. So
because Tyler Hero's there, right? Tyler Hero sees this video and he's like, tonight I'm going to get that steak and put it on my social media.
It makes sense. It comes out in this gold briefcase on ice, and it says Poppy Steak on it, and glittery branded letters, and they brand the steak. I see what they're doing here. My question is, it comes out in this briefcase with ice. Are they going to let it get back to room temperature before it goes back on, Andrew?
Apparently they take it back and they do it right. How long do you rest your steaks?
Well, I'm saying if it's on, you don't really want your steak on ice unless it's going out there really briefly. You don't want it refrigerated, right?
It depends. I have not found. I think a steak is the easiest fucking thing to cook. So you can do it right out of the fridge, or you can do it room temp. I think you have to do different stuff, but it's hard to fuck up a steak. In my humble opinion. If it's cold in the center, you kind of like figure that out with the heat. Maybe like a slower initial sear, and then crank it at the end and let it rest. It's fine. It ends up being good. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. Are you still cooking everything outside?
Hells yeah, dude. I got my induction portable induction cooktop. I have a nice porch. It's not great, but it's good enough. You know why I started doing it? Not to flex my wok skills.
No, flex
outdoors, but I'm trying to incorporate curries in my life. I don't like curries that much. I didn't, and I was like, fuck this. This is enjoyed by half of the world for centuries. I need to get my curry game up. Not Steph Curry, not Eddie Curry, the actual dish. So I've been trying to cook it, and it stinks up my entire house for 2 days. Delicious smell, but out of context, kind of weird if someone comes over. So I've been cooking outside, and it's been much more easy on my house.
Are you going to get an actual grill outside, or are you going to cook on these various surfaces out back?
I just have a wok and this cooktop, which works good. I have a grill, but it's more of a hole in the ground that I just put a grate on. It's fine. You put a bunch of bricks in there, it's safe. Whatever.
I mean, I get that. That sounds.
I am a grill master. I am like Post Malone. I am like Tyler Hero. After all that tomfoolery, just want to go back and play basketball.
Well, Andrew, I think it's about high time that we talk about basketball. I made some allusions early. Not illusions, not magic tricks. Allusions.
This is not a
to the
burlesque
Knicks.
pod. Yeah.
To the
There's no
world's
tassels
most
at MSG.
influential cabaret podcast.
Yeah.
To the Knicks' loss. And you seem at peace. How are you
Tassel.
feeling?
Oh, I feel
Following
great.
a Game 7 loss to the hated Indiana Pacers, and yet it sounds like you don't have a care in the world.
And I'm not trying to be Pollyannic. I'm disappointed they lost. I thought they should have beat the Pacers. Game 3, kind of a must-win if you're that close at the end. They had to win that game. But they ran out of gas. Like, they looked tired. If you would have told me after the OG Anunoby trade that the Knicks would get to the Eastern Conference Finals, I'd be like, are you serious? I'll fucking take that. That is awesome. And if you told me they'd be one game away, I'd be like, that sounds about right, man. Like, get through the first round and take whoever their opponent is to 7 games. Like, a little disappointed, but seems about appropriate because they're not a dominant team they're just not a dominant team. They have no business winning the championship. So I am grateful. I am happy. I'm mad at Knicks fans, but it's cool. What a great season.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I thought the performance in some of the late games in that series was a disappointment.
Sure.
But at the same time, the Knicks didn't have their team.
And everyone's injured. I don't want to claim injury. Injuries are a constant. The Knicks just didn't have enough at the end, whatever reason that may be. Fatigue, roster availability, bad luck. Man, fuck it. It didn't work out.
I mean, yes, there are injury problems across the board. Embiid was hobbled. You looked at Porzingis being out, Jimmy Butler was out, Zion Williamson was out,
got
Kawhi
healthy.
was out.
Yeah.
Right. Look, tons and tons of injuries that took their toll on contenders and turned them into afterthoughts. It totally happened, as you said. At the same time, you can look at that Knicks team and say, well, there's no Randall, there's no Mitch, there's no Bogdanovich.
OG
Hart's
was
got
done. Yeah.
OG obviously was.
Ceremonial sacrifice the last game.
Yeah, they brought him out there to get people fired up.
The crowd really blew it. They didn't get fired up enough, man. The crowd should have gotten more fired up so they can pull through.
Yeah, he couldn't move, and then I want to say it was early in the fourth quarter. The news comes out that Brunson had a broken hand.
Yeah.
So once that had occurred, you didn't even really want them to win, other than
Slam
the fact that it
Gennaro
would be.
dropping 39 points. A star in hiding.
Yeah, I didn't think people were too upset by the loss because, to me, once Brunson was hurt, I was like, all right, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
What are we going to go have Alex Burks go take us to the promised land against the BMM?
I mean, we kind of did the Knicks eulogy last week because the writing was on the wall. I just want to throw out some hot takes now. I want to move past, I really enjoyed that because obviously I enjoy all Knicks games. Somebody on the street accused me for being a negative Knicks fans because I thought Tibbs did a great job, maybe the best job of any coach in the NBA in the second half of the season till the playoffs, because he had to deal with all these injuries and new faces. He is kind of a coach of the year candidate for me. And I also thought Randall was really important to come back healthy if we can't flip him for an even better player. And then they accused me of being negative because everyone else knows that Tibbs needs to get fired and Randall needs to be dealt. I was very confused. This mental gymnastics stuff is weird. I'm like, I don't know. Without Tibbs, you're not here because he had an undermanned rotation and they burnt out and he knew they would burn out. But we mentioned this last week. You want to be here or not? Brunson. I just want to call out Brunson's numbers. I know he is the mayor, the real mayor of New York. He is at whatever zero bond, and he's not paying for shit. But in the regular season, he shot 47% from the field, 40% from three, 84% from free throw. In the playoffs, 44%, 31%, 77%. Like, he was stifled in the playoffs, and he was kind of injured. But just picking him up full court, Becky Hammon, take a bow. You were correct the whole time.
I mean, he had some amazing games in the playoffs. He had that stretch of
He led the league
40.
in scoring in the playoffs.
He was putting up huge numbers because they just don't have a lot of scoring options, especially after Bogdanovich went down and then OG went down. I mean, I find it hard to blame a guy for putting up monster numbers and having a dip in efficiency.
54% true shooting.
Honestly, that's fine.
It's okay, but like, they were undermanned. So there was the fate for them was like they don't have enough firepower. If you shut down Brunson, DiVincenzo might go off occasionally, but like, you got game at that point.
I mean, I agree. I just think, criticizing him. I'm not saying you're being too negative or criticizing
he's awesome.
him. I'm just saying I think most guys who are asked to carry an offense all by themselves and put up that kind of numbers are probably going to see a dip in efficiency. I mean, he went against some teams that were not that great defensively.
Pacers.
And the Sixers with a hobbled Embiid. These were not very, very strong defensive teams. But I also just don't view that efficiency dip as being incriminating. I mean, he went from having an efficiency of around 60% to 54%. I mean, we're getting caught up in the sort of minutia.
Sure.
But I don't really want to hold that against him too much because, I mean...
But this is why we lost, right?
His task was very challenging.
Like, going into Game 6 and 7, I'm like, the Knicks have a ton of injuries. They've been kind of solved. Like, I mentioned Becky Hammon because she was a pro Brunson person, and it got misconstrued. It's like, he has that dog, he can do it. You don't doubt a dog. And all she's saying is like, Edwards can't do this without Cat. Edwards had a bad Game 7, and Cat kind of like picked him up. It's hard to make the conference finals. It's hard to win a championship. And like, people have various degrees of skepticism about Randall. I think he's an true all-NBA player. Without him, it's just like, ooh, are we going to get to Game 7 in the second round? Because that sounds good. And we did, and it was good.
Well, also, I'm not saying this is a critique of Becky Hammond, but you can kind of say anyone isn't good enough to win a chip and usually be safe for a couple of years.
I don't know. She can't say that about the three teams excluding the Pacers remaining. If she says that, I'm like, that's not true. They're totally capable of winning a chip.
But what I mean is, I think that Brunson's better than Ant, in my opinion. Maybe not on defense.
I don't know about that.
But as a scorer, I mean, he just is. Like, the numbers show that he is.
Yeah, Ant's a better defender, slightly. Brunson's a poor defender. Ant is a solid defender. Ant's really good. I don't know. I have Ant right there or past Brunson. Ant is a beast, man. He's not a top-tier star. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about that series later. But he's better than Brunson. If he had Ant in New York, it would be insane. The city would blow
I
up.
think his personality is great. His highlights are more fun. But I just mean, Brunson averaged 29 a game. Ant averaged 26 and 5 assists.
But that's reductive. Like, if you look at their efficiency numbers, it's much different. And he's in the conference finals. I don't know what this.
You're talking about in the playoffs?
Yes, in the playoffs.
Oh,
this is important shit, right? Like, Embiid's whole thing is he hasn't been able to do this.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say, well, Ant's better because he's been more efficient over, 10 games.
These are
After we just played
meaningful
82.
games, though. Right. I mean, he's not playing like tanking teams. I mean, it's a odd stat framing because you're up against only 2 teams so far. So styles make fights. But Ant has had a pretty thrilling couple weeks. His numbers look good. I don't know. I think
he's been great. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, we've watched him play for years, and he's never been this good ever. So, are we going to say, well, this is who he is?
But Brunson
this is the version
right?
of Ant? I don't know.
Brunson is a recent addition to that. I mean, do we count Brunson's Mavs years? I mean, the usage was different. He was younger. I don't count them. Do you know what I mean?
I think Brunson we count this year. I don't know. I'm just saying. I look at Ant and he's a really good player, and he's had a great playoffs. I just have trouble saying, well, this guy, he's an absolute superstar. I don't know.
Oh, I don't. That's a different conversation. But like, if we're doing flat hypotheticals, and the Wolves were like, "Hey, 1-for-1, Ant for Brunson," I'd be like, "In a fucking second, I'll take that."
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't think I would rather have Ant because he's bigger and he can play defense and he can rebound more.
Size is a skill.
He's a better athlete. I agree with all that. I just don't think we can look at what Brunson's accomplished in a total vacuum in the playoffs because they just haven't had their team. I think we saw last night when the Nuggets gave Ant like pretty obvious double teams that didn't even really require a whole lot of like diagnosis. They were just running another defender at him, and he couldn't score a lick.
He had a bad game for sure.
He was like 6 of 24. But I just mean Brunson faces double teams constantly. He runs in circles until he gets the ball, and then he has to attack doubles in a way that like Ant just never does because the Timberwolves were intact.
If Brunson had a true shooting percentage of 62, around where Ant is now in the playoffs, and he won this series, would you be like, well, this run is a credit to his excellence? Or would you say it's like, that's too small, it's the regular season that counts?
Well, I mean, you can look at it both ways. I'm just saying that Brunson's efficiency, generally speaking, has come with the Knicks shorthanded. So I look at it as his
poor efficiency.
I mean, 54 is like
fine.
fairly.
It's below
It's
average.
fine, but I mean, Ant's for the season was like 56.
That's better than 54. You know, like, I don't know. It's granular, right? But like if the fans had any say in this, if Leon Rose was like, there's many caveats to Brunson's statistical line, to Brunson's loss in the second round. There's too many caveats for me to overreact. I would agree with him. If he goes into the summer and is like, we're good to go with Brunson as our 1A, I'd be like, are you sure? Just be sure that you're sure. Because I'm kind of okay with that too. But like, if there is possibly a Devin Booker out there, which I don't think there is, if he's maybe gettable with a ton of resources, breaking up the Villanova 3, like send Josh Hart, maybe send Dante. If we can get Devin Booker, like maybe you should do it.
You mean to have like a second scorer with him?
A guy who can control possessions where Brunson doesn't have to be on ball as much. Randall is that. Yeah, like losing Bojan was a big deal, but consolidating that in a player, it's impossible to get a top 10 player. But if Devin Booker is available, like I don't even love Devin Booker, but you gotta break up the lovable part of this team to do it, I think.
I think the biggest issue with the Knicks, if we're just going to talk about this offseason, is like, do you pay OG a bunch of money? And it's less about, well, we need to add a Devin Booker, we need another scorer. It's more like, well, OG was clearly the perfect fit for this team. And if you had OG and Randall and this whole team, this really makes sense. Where you've got your primary scorer, your secondary scorer, you've got defense everywhere, you've got shooting everywhere. That team might be good enough to win a title.
I agree, but if OG wants 35, you just can't do it. If he wants 25, you do it.
I mean, I don't see him wanting under 30.
That's what I mean. We talked about this last week, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, like
if iHeart gets a $20 million deal, you got to let him walk. It's like you can't give him $20 million.
Yeah, I don't really think people are going to offer him that.
If they don't then you resign them, right? These are kind of simple transactions. If OG wants more than 25, you high five him and wish him the best. If he doesn't, you bring him back. If iHeart wants and gets 20, same thing. If he doesn't, you bring him back.
I mean, the interesting thing with the Knicks is that if they just kind of cut a few of these people loose, they could also, as you said, they have a lot of movable guys that they could just trade away. I mean, Bojan has, I want to say,
a player option?
expiring contract, but with like a tiny little kicker if they don't re-sign him, or if they don't take his team option. Excuse me.
Brunson is extension eligible too.
Then you got OG, coming off the books. You got Burks coming off the books. So the Knicks could have some money to spend. Like, do they go out and try to get a Paul George? Do they bring back OG? Do they try to get Siakam? There are some moves that can be made, but also you have a team like. Well, I mean,
I'm joking. But
Raptors are keeping him.
Yeah.
Philly has a lot of these same options where you can watch like the Pacers and like, oh, Siakam's there, he's playing great, and you're like, Philly could say, hey, dude, like, we'll pay you. Or they could outbid the Knicks for OG. And without getting into OKC now, OKC can do the same stuff.
Well, yeah, they're going to be the iHeart suitors.
I could see that. And then, or Memphis. I could see them.
Steven Adams' health, right?
Well, he's gone.
Oh, Well, what team is he on now? His contract was moved, right?
Is he on the Pelicans now or the Mavericks? I forget. He didn't play. He's hurt.
Yeah. God,
he's just. I mean, he just stopped playing.
I mean, there's. To your
he's on the Rockets. Yeah.
Oh, hilarious! Like, to your point, there's like no running it back for the Knicks. They shouldn't run it back, and I don't think they will. If they keep the three Villanova guys intact, pretty incredible. But I don't think this team is going to look the same at all. And it shouldn't if you want to win a championship. And if you think injuries are a constant. Because shit happens. And it's hard to be the Celtics or the Pacers and like time health at a certain point if Porzingis comes back. So, I mean, I loved it while we had it. But I just don't think this team should only wait for Randall to get healthy.
Well, here's a point. I think looking at the way that the Knicks are built, looking at their popularity, and I get why everyone loves this team. The city fell in love with them.
Yeah. There's a hater. There's haters, but yeah.
But not of this team. They love this team. Everyone yesterday, people were, the typical.
Oh, New York City people.
Yeah, New York City.
Oh, okay.
There was the typical sort of like, oh man, the Knicks. But that's even almost been sidelined.
Sure.
That typical song that people sing, where they say, the Knicks are going to fail. You know how it is with the Knicks. People aren't like that with this team. They really love them. Mm-hmm. And they lost. And there was a little of that sort of fatalism, but mostly it was like, thank these guys for this great year. They had so much heart. They got hurt. They ran out of bodies, but like they fought till the end, did the best they could, which I think is valid.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not suggesting people should be down on the Knicks, but they're really confronted by an interesting offseason here, because to your point, the Knicks might be able to go bold and figure out a way to turn this team into not only a fringe contender but a real contender.
Mm-hmm. We're close
because they have a bunch of guys on really good contracts. They have some money to play with. They have some picks to play with. Like, they might be able to make some really bold moves, but it could also necessitate changing the dynamics of this team. As you said, Josh Hart is someone who will probably have to be moved if they do something bold. Mm-hmm. That's just the money they have. And Randall doesn't have the same appeal that Hart has as a trade piece.
Absolutely.
So they might have to sit there and move some guys around and end up with a team that's like, oh, look, you guys got Paul George. You got this. And people say, I don't know, man. And then the team falls short. And there's this dangerous moment where people say, I knew we shouldn't have blown it up. I knew we shouldn't have traded Strickland. I knew we shouldn't have traded Spencer Dinwiddie and Joe Harris. We should have kept that Nets team with Jared Allen and LeVert. That was the moral team. That was what we should have built around. So this is an interesting offseason, because the crowd-pleasing move would be to do nothing.
Yeah.
Run it back. And people say, hell yeah, let's go. The ballsy move to try to win a championship might not be popular.
I would just wait. Start the season off with Randall, everybody, to the rapture of MSG, and then by the trade deadline, like, figure it out. Because if this team falters, I think every sports fan moves very quickly. If, like, they don't look good, be like, trade Hart, trade DiVincenzo, out of here. Just wait to see how it pans out. They could, like, what the Mavs did was fascinating. They acquired the beast in Kyrie Irving and got him to stay there. And then they added the girth boys, PJ Washington and Gafford. Like, that was kind of a wonderfully built team. And there were bold strokes there. Tanking gods. Everyone thought the Thunder were the tanking branded team in that series. It was Mark Cuban. He's been talking about tanking for Luka since then, and they got penalized for, like, losing games on purpose at the end of last season, this season. I don't know. They've played this strategy as much as Presti has.
Maybe not quite as much as Presti, but a good amount. I mean,
enough.
That's exactly how they got Luka. There's no doubt about that. When I look at this Mavs team, it's funny because the addition of Kyrie was viewed as desperation when they did it. Well, like, sure, Kyrie and Luka. I mean, where are you going with that?
We loved it, man. That was cool as hell. Cookies love that trade.
I like the trade a lot because you got Kyrie for very little. They didn't give up much for him in terms of draft assets.
Guards that talented
and they
together.
Give up Dorian Finney-Smith. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, exactly.
Dorian Finney-Smith, as I said last year, is overpaid.
Yeah.
He's a decent player. He's overpaid. Once they gave him that extension, and he went from making $6 million to making whatever he makes, 14, 15. He was no longer the same player. His econometric value shifted. Who cares? And getting rid of him was actually a salary dump in some ways.
You have this weird Dorian Finney-Smith fixation that I respect. But the cool part of that deal was Cuban identified the damaged market good, right? He was like, oh, you guys hate Kyrie Irving? Oh, he's a plague on society? What's it going to take to get him? Dorian Finney-Smith? Done. And now he's like, not that, But, I mean, Cuban is, I think, a really good GM or a person who is a good businessman.
Honestly, I don't even know who's running that team, but I would presume that Cuban signs off and everything.
I mean, he's the one who came out and was like, we're losing as many games as we can for an opportunity to get this Euro guy. And if anyone's willing to deal, we're interested.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, Dorian Finney-Smith makes 15 next year, 15 and a half the year after that with a player option. That is a negative contract. And they dumped him. And dude, he averaged 8 and 5.
You're
and I'm
so
not even...
fixated on this guy. I love it. What happened?
Well, what do you mean?
Like, what happened with Dorian Finney-Smith that catches your eye? Other than he's overpaid, which is not uncommon.
Well, that when they made this trade, people said, "Oh, I think that's a good deal for the Nets."
No, Kyrie Irving
like,
is the best deal for anybody.
I agree. The reason I'm caught up on Dorian Finney-Smith with people were like, "That's a good deal for Kyrie, Dorian Finney-Smith and a pick." I'm like, "That's a terrible deal," and now you see it. That, as your point was, you ended up getting one of the best offensive players of his generation because he was damaged goods, and you gave up a shit contract and a pick that wasn't that great. That was a brilliant trade, and it built this Mavs team. Look,
I was mad because the Knicks had the rights to their pick, and when they got Irving, I was like, that is no longer going to be an interesting pick.
Look, they also could have just kept Brunson, and this team still would be sort of similar.
Yeah, Cuban wanted to, but there was tampering. Brunson was coming to New York for sure.
Yes, I agree. I just mean, I think if you'd kept Brunson and like this Mavs team could have been built similarly, but Kyrie's just more dynamic off ball, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting question or a topic. Is Kyrie Irving better than Jalen Brunson? Jalen Brunson is like an MVP guy at least top 15, at most some people saying NBA first team. Is he better than Kyrie? Because I'd rather have Kyrie.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
It's tough because vibe-wise, even though he's a politician, I love Jalen Brunson. He's a dog. He's kind of stocky. But Kyrie Irving is like a magical player. I don't know, man. Like, Kyrie Irving, what is that stat? He's 14-0 in elimination playoff games. Like, this dude is a legend. In his prime, I don't know, man. Like, for vibe wise, we love him already, Brunson, but Kyrie's the better player, I think, in a vacuum.
I mean, the money is about the same too.
Mm-hmm. I like Brunson more.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this Western Series. I mean, are you, now that we have Minnesota? All right, let's just go back to Minnesota-Dallas. I'm sorry, Minnesota Nuggets. We haven't even talked about that.
Fucking
Are you shocked?
crazy.
Are you shocked by Game 7?
Not shocked, because Minnesota, obviously, when they go up 2-0 on the road, can win a championship. Shocked at the way the Nuggets went down. Ran out of gas, like a race car chugging, being like going on empty and just like stopping, like Draymond Green at a press conference, right? I'm delighted, but also shocked in the way that Malone kind of managed his players.
That Game 7 was very strange.
Yo, it was a weird-ass game, man.
Not only the 20-point crumble, where it looked like this game was just over, the series was over, the fact that Minnesota came back, and then Denver seemed like they rolled over, and I don't really think they did. I don't think they just said...
No, they tried.
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly. I don't think they said, fuck it. No. And Minnesota just wanted it more. Like, I don't believe that. But the way that it unfolded had that feeling where this Denver team that always seemed inevitable, that you could play them tight and then late in the game, they would just change the dynamics. They would figure it out and they'd beat you by 10. Like, they would just sort it out late. It never really felt like that yesterday. And ultimately, when I look at it, and we can talk about Jokic's fatigue, we can talk about, poor play by Michael Porter Jr., or, underwhelming numbers from someone like Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, whatever. We can talk about all of those things. When it comes down to it, if you score 80-some points, and I know they ended up with 90, but a few of those were late garbage buckets. If you end up scoring like the mid-80s in a Game 7, in 2024, you're just going to lose. They couldn't put up enough points. And yeah, it was an aggregate effort. They shot like 24% from three. They turned the ball over quite a bit. All these poor performances added up. They just didn't score.
Floyd Mayweather, man, the defense of the Timberwolves is their whole story. They are hard to score against. They're big boys. And, like, we can't just brush over the tertiary parts of this Nuggets team. Shout out to Michael Porter Jr.'s family, who's going through a ton. Like, 3 of his brothers got over stuff I can't even remember. Drunken driving, prison for one of them, I believe. I can't imagine that happening and going out there and playing. He had a really good LA series. He was excellent. He scored 20 points or more 4 out of the 5 games, 19 points in the one that wasn't. And then he's a scorer, so I'm just going to reduce this to numbers. In the 7 games against Minnesota, 20 points, 9, 21, 4, 6, 8, 7. You're not going to win. Like, you cannot just chop off a third of your, or like, you cannot just remove 20 points from your tally and hope to compete against a Minnesota team that is known for its defense.
Yeah, the thing with Michael Porter Jr. is that I think he's on the tier of like a Tobias Harris in terms of being
yeah, absolutely. He's a
like a non-star.
Yeah.
Except that when he's playing well, he has a discernible skill set that really meshes well with Jokic, with Murray, with Gordon. But he is a elite, high volume 3-point chucker, and he's enormous.
Mismatch. He's a built-in mismatch against anyone except the Wolves.
He can really shoot, and
he can shoot fine. Yeah,
I'm saying I'm saying they're going up. It's like Jokic finds him, that shot is going up. There's no hesitation. He's letting it rip, and he's big as shit. He's not a great defender. He's not a great passer.
Right.
He's not asked to do any of those things particularly. It's like go out there and let it fly.
Yeah.
And when he's way off, kind of to your point, not to get too into the weeds with the finances, but they have a big investment in him. He makes a quarter of the salary cap.
Yep.
So when he's not there chipping in on the scoring side, he's not giving you defense. He's not giving you passing. He's not giving you a ton on the boards or in terms of, the, let's say, circulatory system of a team, right? He's not helping the ball necessarily move around. He's not this, connective tissue that makes your offense or defense great, because he's not like the sharpest tool in the shed on the court. His basketball IQ is not his strong suit. Mm-hmm. And this is why I only brought up Tobias. When those guys who have these other deficiencies aren't giving you scoring, they're tough to have on the floor.
I mean, last year, Malone removed MPJ to controversy, but they won. So he was proved right. I feel like a year's gone by, and he's like, well, I can't take him off the floor because Bruce Brown isn't here. And in the elimination game, he played 34 minutes, shot 3 for 12, 1 for 6 from 3, 0 assists, 0 steals, 2 blocks, and 9 rebounds. 7 points. It was a calamitous second half for the Nuggets, and I don't think it reflects on Jokic's legacy at all. There's a lot of debate about, do we want dynasties or not? Like, did we expect the Nuggets to win 3 or 4 in a row, and does that alter the landscape of the way we perceive like this era of basketball? I don't know. I don't care. Ratings are down. People were arguing about ratings, which is interesting. I want the Wolves to win it all. I was kind of rooting for the Wolves in a way because I want to see Cat win it all. I think he gets a lot of criticism for no reason. I really want him to win a championship. But it was a strange game, man. It was an odd thing to witness and kind of a delightful thing to witness.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was rooting for the Timberwolves once they came back. Not to be a front runner, I was just thinking, okay, Nuggets are up. You got to play better to knock off the champs. They got this. They were down 2-0. What just a flex. Just spot the other team 2 games and then win, for the next 6 or for whatever it is, for the next 5. Like, man, that's a true champ. You gotta come harder to knock those boys off. And then the Wolves just started scoring. And the fucked up thing was that they missed a lot of open looks.
Yeah, man.
And that was while they broke that 20-point lead down to nothing and then took a lead of 10 points themselves. They missed a lot of open looks. Ant, who I do not think is a great passer, made some nice reads to guys, and they were missing threes. The Nuggets just couldn't score, as I said. Scoring in the mid-80s. Just last Porter point. I don't even want to get back into discussing that chump. No, I mean, that's just crude. Just mean.
Come on, man. What did he do to you? Dorian Finney-Smith ass player.
He's no Dorian Finney-Smith.
No one is, apparently.
Bum. But last 4 games, which the Nuggets won 2 of those, so it wasn't costing them games. They were able to win with him. But 29% from the floor, 19% from 3, under 1 assist per game in 34 minutes while averaging 6.3 points. Woof.
I am not a fan of MPJ's contract, his on-court contributions, and his off-court content, even though some of it's funny. I have trouble finding, and this is obviously, I'm Knicks pilled, and a lot of Knicks fans would be like, we should have taken him. He was right there. We passed up on Porter Jr. That's why we're a poverty franchise. I'm like, yeah, I don't really love him. He's usually injury prone, so shout out to him for playing as much, but it's hard not to love Jokic. I know it's like a thing with his horses, and it's become kind of a joke that has played itself over and over. I really like Jokic. I don't really feel much for Murray, and I don't like Porter Jr. So, I don't know. Slay the dragon. Take down the champs. I think Jokic will be back. I think Porter Jr. is absolutely dealable, but they have to get some dogs in there a little bit.
The thing that's funny was, they seemed invincible at times. And it turns out that they were invincible.
Well, can we talk about fatigue and this season where Silver enacted a stipulation where you have to play X amount of games to be available for awards, and he really cracked down on load management? Because a lot of these guys look tired. Between the Knicks and the Nuggets, we saw the fatigue with our own eyes, bro. We watched the games. And these guys were too tired. And do you want your players burning out now or really present for the first half of the season?
I mean, part of this is just the playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. Where I don't know if it matters when it occurs. It's the accumulation not only of the full season, but of right now. Mm-hmm. Because some of these guys, depending on the team, got some rest late in the year. Oh, we'll cut the minutes down. Not everybody, not the Knicks.
It's not enough. A month's not enough.
But I just mean, yes, I think there is a cumulative effect going back from, you played all these games.
Last year, the Nuggets played until June.
Totally. But I also look at it and say, these guys are just playing a lot of minutes now also.
Totally, right? And, this is why I think they should not expand the league. There's not enough players on these bench. Push the cap up. Let's get, each team some more guys, because just in a bubble of entertainment of our hobby, it sucks to see one guy go down and just, lose all kind of competitive edge. I
mean, it's messed up that this year we viewed it as kind of being the best season ever, and I mean, I'm sort of in a good. It's not the best season ever, but there were so many good teams, so many interesting teams, so many great players. And then we end up with a Final Four. You're like,
shout out to the Bulls.
No, shout out to the Wolves. I'm not saying it would have been more legit without the Nuggets. It's just looking at it, how it shook out. You're like, wow, this is it. Look at this season. I'm like, this is what you wanted, right? We talked about parity. There's so many good teams. Well, here are your Timberwolves, your Mavericks, your Pacers, and your Celtics. You wanted there to be 15 good teams, and you wanted there to be 12 teams who all won 48 to 50 games. Voila.
People are beefing about like travel calls, about the refereeing, super boring stuff, right? I think the main takeaway from this year's playoffs, and I agree with you, this, including Wemby, like this season has been tremendous. But every season gets better and better. I love this shit. The takeaway I have from these playoffs is the East is so whack that like the stories are interesting, but the quality of play in the beginning of the night pales into comparison on the West Coast. I think they should just seed the bracket from like 1 to 16. I don't think they should divide it up into conferences anymore, because the East sucks, man. It's like the Pacers are in the Final Four. Like, that's shout out to the Pacers. I'm a Halliburton fan. I'd rather him be corny as the Joker or the Riddler than be like, we're not the hard workers. We play a game. You're the hard workers. I like him talking some shit. I enjoy it. So, like, that's just my taste. But having him in the Final Four is like, and then we don't have the Thunder. We don't have Shea. We don't have Jokic. I'm like, ugh, oh, okay, fine.
Well, right. I mean, you look at the way that the Celtics got here. It's like, okay, you beat a Miami team without Jimmy. Then you beat a Cavs team that was fairly mid, but also missed Mitchell and didn't have Jared Allen. And again,
everyone has injuries. They took care of business.
Injuries,
whatever.
And you play who's in front of you. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But I just mean really easy route. Then you have the Pacers, who beat a Milwaukee team without Giannis, with Lillard missing a couple games. Then you went 7 against a Knicks team that was missing its entire front line. Not inspiring in terms of the lore of the friends you make along the way.
Yeah. I mean, do we care that, like, we've always had conferences? Obviously the NBA wants the Knicks, the Lakers, the Celtics to do well-ish. The Knicks, I'm not so sure. But I don't think we need to preserve the sanctity of these split brackets. I think if we're going to do an in-season tournament with one meaningless game, and if we're going to change the rules in the middle of the season, the foul calling that transforms so many team builds that have been built based off of the last decade of trends, then we can rearrange this shit, man. This is not like air or water or a natural occurring resource. This is just playoff seeding. Just like redo it so we get some really good teams at the end, with all due respect to the Pacers.
With all due respect to the Pacers, naturally. Well, let me give the argument for keeping it as it is.
Go for it.
And this isn't even really where I stand. Just the argument would be, forget travel, man. We're adults. that was vestigial. Well, you can't take too many planes. You'll get bubbles in your oxygen in your bloodstream.
Memphis is a West Coast city. Yeah,
that's what. It made no sense, or it makes no sense now. Like, we've got to take a stagecoach to the West Coast to play the Lakers. Like, that'll take a couple of weeks. But yeah, that would be the argument, that the traveling would be annoying if it was, say, Boston against Sacramento in the first round. And that's a little bit true. That would be kind of annoying to be taking 5-hour planes, except they're all chartered, whatever, dude. It's not that big of a deal.
Are you a dog or not?
just fall asleep on the plane. Play some cards. It's
Realign
fun.
the league based off of altitude. How about that? The arena
dude,
altitude.
It's Cookies episode 4, 5, 6. Learn to play some CeeLo.
Right.
Headcrack, baby. Headcrack. But the main argument would be rivalries. That would be it. That you have these storied rivalries between the Lakers and the Spurs, or the Sixers and the Celtics, and the Knicks, and you've got the Heat and the Knicks and the Pacers and the Knicks, that you have beef going back in playoffs and lore. And we saw Reggie Miller trot it out. Here's Reggie Miller and the choke.
That was fun.
It was fun, and it connects the modern NBA to the past in a way that much of the game doesn't. You know, the game itself is different. The players are different. All these things are change, except the one thing that remains mostly a constant are team names, team cities, and obviously some move around, but not that many, and especially not now the league makes so much money. You know, there's not been much mobility in terms of teams upping and leaving. I mean, sure, you know, we had New Orleans get a franchise and OKC, but for the most part, it's been static since like the 80s, with the exclusion of the expansion teams. So being able to connect Reggie Miller and John Starks and Carmelo and Larry Johnson to the current Knicks team and their rivalry with the Pacers. Oh, that's like with Reggie and Roy Hibbert and the Davis brothers, who weren't really brothers, and Austin Crozier. I think that is the main reason the NBA is so loath to actually get rid of conferences.
That's why they have LL Cool J and Common as main characters in their arenas, right? Fat Joe, you work for the NBA now. Yeah, I hear you, and I don't give a fuck about it. And I can pretty much safely say, like, no one really gives a fuck about this. Like, the Reggie moment was cool, but, like, it's a long time ago. Make new rivalries. Someone just get Pat Bev on your roster to say fuck you to somebody, and you have a new rivalry. You know, like, these antagonists are valuable. I stand behind that idea. Like, Halliburton being kind of a dick is great. Brunson being like, the best team won, I'm just trying to be humble. Like, cool. I love that. I love him. But you just need to add a shit talker, and in order to drum up a rivalry, it just doesn't take long. Knock someone down, and then there you go.
I hear you, and I'm more in favor of just seeding all 16 teams, or even doing it the more fun way, where it's like the top seed gets to pick their opponent out of everybody.
They need to be rewarded.
I think that would be really fun. Like, you do the play-in, and then you have a seeding, and it's like, okay, we're gonna take, or you could just say, we'll take the winner of this series. I don't know. I mean, forget all the logistical, like, molehills. It could be easily sorted out. But I do think there is something valid about saying, from a marketing standpoint, Trae Young is now our enemy from this playoff series. Well, he's going to be playing here 3 times a year versus coming once.
Trae Young's not even going to be a Hawk next year. Like, what are we manufacturing?
True. But I think, like, within the conference, you are going to see Embiid 3 times, and that'll be a big deal next year because of the playoff series versus only, seeing him once every season.
You bring up a great point because, if I'm in the West Coast, I want Wemby in my arena twice. If I'm the WNBA, I want Caitlin Clark here as much as possible. It's like, actually, we're going to take a few games away from you. It's like, wait, but that's like a huge profit that I'm missing out on. I heard she went to Barclays, and it was like a $2 million profit or revenue. I'm not sure, but it was rare. And everyone's like, oh, shit, she's immensely valuable to the league just with her presence. And if, I don't know how many people go to see Joel Embiid, but he is a reigning MVP or previous MVP in his prime. I want him in my arena as much as possible.
The other part of this, though, is that you're still going to play half teams from your conference. Mm-hmm. Just by the odds. Yeah. Like, it's not saying we're going to pit everybody against someone from the other conference.
Sure.
It's still...
But in the playoff situation, like... Wemby's in the playoffs. I'm like, oh my God, can I get this series? Like, can he be in my building at least twice?
Oh, totally. Yes, that makes sense. I mostly also mean that it's not all going to be like West Coast. Yeah. Okay, the Knicks, who are you playing? Like the Spurs, the Kings, the Nuggets. Like, no, it's going to be a mix because of the way the brackets are set up. You're going to have to go through whoever. And yeah, I agree though. It's like, why should all of Wemby's playoff glory over the next 15 years all be in West Coast cities?
Yeah.
That's kind of true too. Like, who cares that much about Wemby against the Sacramento Kings? What about Wemby in the playoffs against the Knicks?
Crazy, right? And LeBron was this guy for 20 years, you know, and just because of name recognition, and I don't know. They have to work out the financials. I don't give a fuck about the financials, but I think good basketball at the end is important, and I hope the Pacers make the Celtics win 4 games against them. I am a Halliburton fan, day one at this point, if they're going to play the Celtics. But, like, let's say they do beat the Celtics, and I'm like, that was cool. Now we have the Pacers in the finals? Like, what are we doing? I mean, respect to the Pacers. If they beat the Celtics, they deserve it. They even deserve it now. But you know what I'm smoking.
Dude, I am here for this Pacers-Mavs finals.
Right? I mean, we will watch it, and we will talk about it, and Luka being, like, elevated to that level is fun. You know, I don't know, man. Awesome. Like, Caitlin Clark going to Indiana is cool, but if everyone had their way, she would probably go to LA or New York, right?
True. I mean, look, here's my thing. I agree with that. I think the Nuggets were really good. I think Jokic is, you know, the best player of this generation. You know, Embiid is up there, Giannis is up there, but, you know, Jokic as good as it gets. You know, kind of post LeBron. I guess that's the best way of putting it.
Absolutely. Fuck yeah.
And, you know, and LeBron, this doesn't take anything away from him. LeBron's goated, but Jokic's era has been, you know, the last 4 or 5 years, we'll say.
Undeniable. He balled out yesterday.
Right. So Nuggets, 100% legit champion. This is not to diminish them at all, or any recent champion. But this year, we're going to get someone who has not won a championship in recent history. None of them have. There just is not even an example other than the Mavs 2011, Celtics 2008. And these are just different teams, right? When we're talking about that Mavs team, that's the one that beat the Heat.
Was Dwight Powell on that team? No.
Right? But that's the team with Dirk. You know, this is a completely different era. We're talking, you know, 12 years ago, which is not that long overall. If you're a Mavs fan and they win this year, you'd be like, it's kind of a sweet ride, man. We won with 2 different teams.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
But still, totally different team. And, of course, the Celtics team that won was, you know, your man Doc Rivers' squad with their big 3. That's like 2 eras ago. Mm-hmm. Even though it was only 1 year or 2 years before the Mavericks. It just feels like a different year. 3.
IT2 sandwich. Yeah.
But what I'm getting up to is, like, post-Warriors, you had the Raptors beating them, and that was with the Warriors all injured. But then you had the Lakers, one-off, Bucks, one-off, Golden State, still part of their dynasty, but really a one-off, where they didn't feel like they were the best team necessarily. Then you had the Nuggets, and this year you're going to have someone else. It feels a bit like we're going into, like, the parody era. There's no team I look at right now, with the exception of OKC, and say, there's a dynasty brewing here.
Oh, you don't think Nuggets? If the Nuggets won next year, would you be shocked?
No, not really. But I'm just saying
the Warriors didn't. We would be shocked, right?
Yeah. No, that was why I made that whole preamble about how Jokic is really great. Because he's so great that if they had a different team around him, they could certainly win multiple championships, and we're the favorite to win it this year. But they won't. So that's what I was saying. We're looking at like 5 years in a row of one-offs, basically.
That's cool. I'm into it. I mean, the Jordan, there's been chatter about the super team. The Jordan teams were super teams. Going through the Heat, the Celtics only won one with that super team. But are we we're certainly in a post small ball era. Are we in the post super team era? This is kind of like a dead end conversation because, as we've talked about, just make a super team and win. I don't know.
We are until we aren't.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, the Nets could have been, and next year when the Knicks get Luka and Wemby, there's your super team, and Maxey. But yeah, I mean, I really am enjoying these playoffs. I think these are really cool games, even though fatigue is the main character. Fatigue and injury more than ever. And maybe the reason why there won't be as many easy dynasties is these principal figures of these team builds are at a bigger risk at this point, in my opinion, and I have to look at the numbers, of injury at the wrong time, whether that be fatigue or the style of play. It's just like too fast, too violent, and too long.
You know what's kind of hard to understand the impact of? The NBA made rules with the repeater tax that have yet to kick in and are about to.
Yeah.
And they basically have stipulations that if your team is over the salary cap apron for a certain amount of years, you lose draft picks. You lose the ability to sign anyone except for, veteran minimums. Mm-hmm. They're really, really punitive in terms of teams doing what the Warriors did, which was just saying, hey, we want to win. We're just going to pay everybody forever.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up winning the Warriors that last chip, like kind of post-dynasty chip, was that they were able to keep that group together and things sort of fell into place for them. And they added Wiggins, who was overpriced. And they were able to absorb that contract too, in the way that everything shook out.
And their arena just opened, and they had factored in all that cost.
Yeah, I just mean that they were able to win that title because they paid everyone so freaking much money. They just sort of bought it.
Sure,
And
I mean, but
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, they didn't break a rule.
No. If you're an owner, you should want to
Indiana pay up.
buy titles. Like,
Sure.
Like that's if you don't want to buy titles, then sell your team. Like, fuck that. Your job is you're a billionaire. Go spend money and try to win a title. That's your job as the owner. It's not to make money.
But then the Indiana franchise might be like, we just played the Knicks, and this whole coverage on ESPN has been pro-Knicks. We had Stephen A. Smith, Spike Lee eulogizing or, like trying to pump up their fans. Mike Breen, ironically, was the only one kind of pulling back and being like, we must talk about these Pacers because they're good and they're winning and they will win. And then these small markets might be like, hey, if you're not going to push our product, we can't do what the Warriors did because we can't get this momentum, right?
And that Dirk Mavericks team, they kind of bought a title too. And there's nothing wrong with it. Owners should want to do it. But Cuban just would spend and spend and spend. They had an enormous payroll. They were making, I'm sure they were making good money, but he was willing to spend it in order to win. And then as soon as they won, all of a sudden, like, actually, we're not going to pay Tyson Chandler. We're not going to pay Jason Kidd. You can go play for the Knicks. Sean Marion, yeah, you're out of here. Go play for Miami.
Yeah.
They totally said, all right, mission accomplished. We're not doing that anymore. And I'm saying that the new rules have yet to kick in. So we'll see which teams are really willing to spend, because if everyone says, well, look, there's no such thing really as a 3 superstar team unless they're homegrown, because then you have a certain amount of time in, say, like the OKC situation where, like, okay, we're paying SGA, but we don't have to pay Jalen Williams for a second. We don't have to pay Chet for 2 more years. So we can go out there and try to sign a PG. We can try to trade for KD. We can build a super team.
Not can,
but it's gonna
they
be,
have to. They must, right?
I mean, they should.
There's no choice. If you're that team, you cannot just wait for these players to grow and pay them, right? Like you have to be aggressive here.
Yeah, and I saw people talking about Philly and like, well, they jumped the gun by going out there and getting Jimmy Butler. They should have let it naturally progress. I'm like, you're totally wrong.
Yeah, they had to.
That was the exact right move.
Yeah.
Because Embiid was making his money. You got Butler, and then Simmons' money hadn't kicked in yet because he was on a rookie deal. That's what you have to do. You have to add that star before everyone gets real money. The Sixers' problem was Tobias Harris. Different conversation. But yeah, OKC can't sit here and say, yeah, we're just going to take an expiring contract this year. We're going to wait until all these guys make $40 million a year. And then what?
Yeah. The Knicks should not run it back. They have cheap players who are great. You have to add a cheeseburger, right? Like, it is the time for Presti, Rose to do the Jimmy Butler thing. They should have paid.
Daryl Morey?
They have to go for it. I mean, Embiid's window is everything. He has like a couple more years on his deal, a couple more years on his legs. Like, are there enough big names to go around? There's enough assets, right? These teams have assets. They're kind of loaded, the Knicks and the Oklahoma City Thunder, even more so. Are there enough great players?
No. I mean,
right?
And the Spurs have money too.
Yeah. The Spurs should go for it.
Philly could get up to $60 million open. So they have some assets, but I think they're mostly trying to just sign outright, whether it's Siakam, whether it's OG, whether it's Paul George. Those are your main targets right now.
I hate it.
I could totally see Paul George saying, well, I just want to stay in LA, man.
For sure.
I'm just flirting with you to get the interest up so Ballmer will pay up.
Ballmer might. He doesn't care.
And Siakam say, well, we just made the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe the finals. I'm not going anywhere. I get to play with TJ McConnell. The glazing is nonstop.
Siakam's been accused of having no bag. Does he have a bag?
Kind of. He looked pretty good yesterday.
Yo, he's won a championship. He has looked good. But is he a max player?
Well, it depends on the max, right? Because his numbers are kind of the same as, like, let's say, Jaylen Brown.
I'm saying Siakam doesn't have tremendous isolation moves. He's not necessarily a ball controller. He's tall. He's a decent defender. He's not like a noteworthy rebounder. He's a steady player. I like him quite a bit. Are you going to give him big money? Are you going to give him $40 million a year?
I don't think I would.
He's going to want that, right?
He should.
Yeah.
And then you look at a guy who was, 21, 8, 4.
That's not
Those
bad.
aren't.
Yeah, that's not bad.
He's efficient, 60% true shooting.
But
pretty good.
You watch the damn games, bro. He's good.
No, I know. I'm saying he did the exact same thing in the playoffs. He's putting up, 21 to 8 and 4.
Yeah.
Steady.
He's Tobias Harris.
He is. He's just a cooler version of Tobias Harris.
Yeah, I would be skeptical if I was Daryl Morey to pay Tobias.
I know.
Pascal Siakam. Yeah.
He can sort of shoot.
Right?
I mean, shot 32% from 3 this year in the playoffs. Career 27%. 39% from 3 in Indiana this year. That's great.
That's nice.
But doesn't take very many. 2.5. Career 330 or 33%. Looking a little bit Tobias-y, my man.
You know what's not looking very Tobias-y? This pod.
This perfect pod.
We did it. Nick's out.
Cookies. 4, 5, 6.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.